edition of Three Things I Learned. I've got a special guest today. You might want to know whether Sean Connery actually knew what he was talking about on a nuclear submarine, or whether or not down periscope was actually a worthwhile representation of life on a sub. My guest today is going to be talking about that. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss it. Well, for much of the Cold War, the U.S. Navy ballistic missile submarine was a rare sight on the ocean horizon. They went everywhere, and where they went and when they went was shrouded in secrecy. Still is. Since the 1960s, they've been tasked to cruise undetected through the world's oceans, designed and built for one critical mission. That is to deter the threat of global nuclear war. My guest today is no stranger to the secrecy of life on an Ohio-class submarine, or boomer as it's called. He's a former reactor operator, an entrepreneur, and probably one of my best friends. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Chris Wessling to the show. Chris, thank you very much for joining us. I'm so happy you were able to come and be a part of the show today.
Yeah, this is really exciting. It's a topic I don't talk about very much anymore, so that's pretty kind of fun.
Well, I've known you for far too long. First of all, I haven't had a chance to say it face to face, and this is the first time I've seen you since I moved away from California. So congratulations on graduating. You recently graduated from Fuller with your master's, so congrats on that. Yep, we've got to get the swag in there. Give it a little plug for the alma mater. But today's topic at hand, and we've got a friend tuning in, Andrew, who says, "Go Army, beat Navy." I'm sure you can say that all he wants far away, but he can't say that to your face. Our topic here today, not many people have a chance to live on a nuclear submarine. It's something that far few people, actually, even the Navy, get a chance to experience. Am I right in understanding that being a Navy nuke is one of the hardest or most exclusive jobs that you can get?
That is what they tell us. There's a lot of testing that goes into it, both psychological and from an educational standpoint. To answer your first question that you posed, I would say that down periscope of all of the movies that I've seen about submarines is the most accurate.
You see a lot of this.
Yeah.
Well, whether it was a real question, you see a lot of the movies and a lot of the media portrayals, and that's all the general populace will ever understand, right? We'll sit there and assume that the inside of a nuclear submarine, or the inside of any submarine, is going to look like what it does on down periscope, or looking at the old Tigers, or the more modern submarines in Crimson Tide, or Hunt for Red October. But tell me a little bit about what is it really as tight quarters? Is it really as smelly or hot? Or tell me a little bit, what's the environment like on an actual running submarine?
So Crimson Tide took place on an Ohio class submarine. It was not a good representation of the way the bunk rooms were laid out. The idea that there's this bilge compartment that runs the length of the boat, that would be a horrible design. But it did give a feel for how open the ballistic missile submarine is. It's almost 2 football fields long. Not all of that living space. We have ballast tanks on the end of it. But we could easily throw, not that we ever did, we could easily throw a football, say, around the engine room. There were people that would run around the upper compartment of the reactor, or excuse me, not the reactor compartment, the missile compartment. You'd have to duck and make sure you had your cadence set well, but you could actually run laps around there for real exercise. It is big. The hot racking that you might hear about, where you have 3 people doing two different beds, that doesn't take place on a ballistic missile submarine. There's fairly large, get my gesticulations the right size, there's fairly large bunk rooms where you have 9 racks that are situated in and around the missile tubes. You have the space of, well, everybody gets the space, the living space for themselves to sleep, of a wide coffin, and then kind of a narrow, or a shallow place to put your stuff, and then a drawer that's probably 13 inches wide, about 20 inches deep, 20 inches long, and about 12 inches deep. And that's all the space that you have for your personal belongings.
So cramped quarters, very
Mm-hmm.
little in terms of personal belongings. I mean, you're stuck on a boat. You probably have enough changes of clothes and things, and you probably end up smelling a little bit. I think, yeah, I remember you telling me that the cleaner that they use there is one of the smells that you will never get rid of on any type of clothing that you have, right?
Yeah, you've pretty much sacrificed your clothing to the Navy at that point when you get it cleaned on the sub.
How long, is a typical tour when you go out from port on any particular set of missions? How long are you out for?
So I did 5 or 6 patrols, and all of them were 10 to 11 weeks long. Um, all but one of those, we made a stop about half to 2/3 of the way through in Hawaii for a few days to do different sort of testing that we would do. Um, but it's I don't know, it's kind of it's a long 10 or 11 weeks. Typically the first, my experience at least, typically the first 2 to 3 weeks you're out at sea, you're so tired from the refit period that you sleep through that portion of it when you're not on watch. So that portion of it goes by pretty quickly. And then of course the last 2 weeks feel much longer than 2 weeks typically feel.
Yeah, is it something where when you're there, I mean, are you dedicated to uh, everybody specifically has an area of expertise. You were a reactor operator. I want to assume that you're going to go up to a comms post or a navigation post and vice versa. Nobody's going to trade hands. But is it one thing where you're sitting there most of the time looking at a console and measuring gear or measuring pressure and all the things that you have to do, or are what's the day to day thing?
So on the submarine, once again, my experience, it might have shifted. It's an 18-hour day. So you're on watch for 6 hours, you're off going for 6 hours, and then ideally you're in the rack for 6 hours. If you say started on the mid watch, so midnight to 6 a.m. on a Monday morning, for your off going, on that Monday morning, you would be casualty assistance team for drills. We're constantly drilling, we're constantly pretending that things are broken so that when things do go bad, we reflexively are able to engage and get things fixed quickly. That afternoon period on the Monday would be training, and then you're back on watch from 1800 or 6 p.m. to midnight. You finally get to sleep that midnight to 6 a.m. The 6 a.m. to noon, you would then be the drill team. So you'd be the ones wearing a red hat, pretending that you're fire, waving sheets and smoke and doing whatever. Yeah, really. And then and we're Tuesday now. So noon to 6, excuse me, noon to 6 p.m., you would be back on watch. And then 6 p.m. to midnight, you do maintenance. And then you'd finally get to sleep midnight to 6, or most of that at least. And then you're on watch Wednesday morning for the drills, and then off going Wednesday afternoon. You might have training. You might have, I mean, there's any number of things. But Wednesday could end up being you're up for another 18 hours, and you might get to sleep for a few hours from that midnight to 6 a.m. And then you're back on that rotation again. You're just constantly going through. There's a weekly exercise called Field Day, which as kids, that was really excited on a submarine. That means you're cleaning for 6 hours. Yeah, really. You might get an extra few hours a day on the weekend because you're not going to do training. You're not going to be doing the drilling on the weekend. So, yeah. And then when you get into the we call them ORSAs, Operational Reactor Safeguard Exams, or the TREs, Technical Readiness Exams. A lot of people just stay awake for 3 days and catch a 10, 15-minute nap here or there because it's constant drills, it's constant training, it's constant being checked up on things.
With a lot of that constant training and drilling and sleep deprivation, I mean, is there a level of reward that comes from that? Like, are there special pay bumps for being a nuke that you're going to be, dealing with a lot of this more than somebody who might be on a surface vessel?
Yeah, I think you go from being paid 7 cents an hour to like 9 cents an hour with that. Um, when I talk about how down periscope best mirrors submarine life, it's that in that sleep deprivation, in that dialing down of the oxygen content to kind of keep people calm, everybody goes crazy a little bit, and you learn how to operate at a suboptimal level. Um, there's a lot of theory that goes behind that. Obviously, when you're in war, it's not like a normal day at the office. So you're being prepared to be able to function at a consistent level during high pressure situations.
So tell me a little bit about the preparation. So I understand there's the basic, the learning how to take orders and the learning how to, the physical fitness and readiness and stuff that goes along with it. But there's an amount of testing to get into your MLS or A school that you went into, right? So tell me a little bit about what kind of like training do you go through once you test into becoming a nuke, like to then qualify or attempt to qualify to be assigned above.
So, excuse me. So to even attest in to be a nuke, there's the ASVAB. I don't think the ASVAB score has as much of an effect on whether or not you can become a nuke, but it certainly gets the recruiters to target you for those jobs. You take a nuke test at MEPS, I guess is what they call the station. You go in, you do a basic physical, they check you out, make sure you're not covered with moles or something. Then you take a physics, chemistry, engineering sort of a thought process test. The guy that I took that test with was the valedictorian from his school. They were fawning over him because he had these amazing grades. I had horrible grades in high school, and they were fighting whether or not I could even take the test. And my recruiter convinced them that they should let me take the test, and I could hear them through the quote unquote soundproof walls that just let him take the test, he's going to fail it. Well, when we finished the test, they came in and they started talking to the valedictorian about the options as a sonar tech, and then they invited me into the nuclear program to go talk about that.
So
that's
and if I remember correctly, you going in originally started school as a theater major, right? So you went
right.
from
So
being...
I graduated high school. I graduated high school, no discipline. I just figured that if it was something that I loved, I would put in the work. And I got to college, and I did two things wrong. First, I just didn't understand myself at that point, and I put all of my classes in the morning, which anyone that knows me now knows just leave me alone before 10 or 11. So I set myself up for failure there. And then when I got into the musical theater the theater classes, the music classes, I now had to work at something that I always loved, and I discovered that I didn't automatically have, the drive, the motivation to do it. And the way I say it is, before the Navy became my last choice, I took it.
And little to no, yeah, little to no experience, right? Or at least kind of academically or track record of experience,
right?
Compared to your valedictorian.
Exactly.
Going into then becoming a nuke, what are the things in the trainings that you undertook, especially going into becoming a reactor operator? And I love some of the knowledge that you've always like just dropped on me when it comes to atomic energy in general, and a lot of the things that you learn. I'm assuming, or that you told me you learned about becoming a reactor operator. So what's kind of like that process, and what do they drill into you that you can share?
Oh yeah, totally. All right. I've been debriefed. I don't remember anything. No, that thing, that dropping of information to quell any sort of argument, that is totally what is a nukeism. We're trained pretty early to just dump information to make sure that we can bypass any sort of argument. Probably one of the first things that I learned in A school, and we started with 17 people, And the A school is just the electronics technical school. We started with 17 people, and by week 7 we were down to 5. So we got rid of 12 of those people. One of them tried to kill himself. We had a number of people that act out, meaning that they couldn't keep up with the academics. And then there's a number of other people that just behaviorally spun out because of the pressure. At that point, we were going to class from about 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You get an hour or so break, and then you had to go back in. And most people were on a mandatory study program that required an additional 5 hours in a room, in a desk, completely quiet, with somebody sitting in the corner monitoring whether or not you're actually working. So it was just pretty intense from the start. But one of the first things that I learned was to show my work. As silly as that sounds, I was taking a math class. I've always enjoyed math. I've always been good at math. I get my first math test back, and I have a horrible grade. And I didn't get any of the answers wrong. But what I didn't do was I didn't show the steps that I took to get to those answers. By the time we finished that, the math curricula, I ended up being the highest scored person in there. I was the honorman. But the real difference, and the thing that affected me, was rather than going A plus B times blah, 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 blah equals 7, I started showing my work, because in the nuclear world, and nuclear Navy especially, where we're operating nuclear reactors in San Diego Bay and San Francisco Bay, and doing all these places that, the people that would picket nuclear power don't even notice that half a dozen nuclear reactors just passed by a few hundred yards away from them. There is no room for, I got this math problem wrong because I didn't show my work. So it took me from a place where I did a lot of jumping to breaking down into multiple steps and making sure that I was right at each one of those steps, or at least that I had taken in consideration what was going on at each one of those steps.
Well, I know you've got some bombs yourself, or knowledge to drop on us in terms of the 3 things that you've learned. Actually, I've got one question here coming from Andrew. Does anyone have to wear protective clothing on a nuke sub that makes sure that it won't turn into an X-ray man? Is everybody wearing their legs?
No, not at all. You're not in the reactor compartment while you're operating, and when you do go in, of course, depending on where you're going, you might wear something so you don't get contamination on you. The first rule of fluid systems is that they leak. But we wore these things called TLDs, thermoluminescent dosimeters, and I got less radiation working 5 yards, 10 yards, somewhere between there, away from an operating nuclear reactor than you would get going to the beach, or definitely less than somebody would get. I would, in 3 months, I would get less than somebody that took a transcontinental flight. So the radiation was, the design of the submarines, at least our submarines, designed for very low exposure.
Yeah. All right, so I've got a couple of questions that I want to get to.
Okay.
The first one that I have is an SOS worth running away from the mess hall?
You want a short story or a long story on that one? Yes, or do you want
you tell me.
So we had just come in from, it was during the refit period, which is a period of time for about a month and a half, where you have a 24-hour day where you're up, followed by an 8-hour day, followed by a 14-hour day, then you go to the 24-hour day. Right. It was a Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening. And Sunday evenings, we usually had a better meal. And this one, we were supposed to have this meal called Steamship Round, which is like Class D meat, but you pour gravy on it, and so it tastes better. But I hear over the announcement system, engineering duty officer lay topside, engineering officer or duty officer lay topside, and I can hear the sirens of a what are those ambulance things? Oh, ambulance. And then when I finally got off watch, we went up, and it was a big pan of beanies and weenies. It was. Okay. So I asked what had happened. Well, they had done the Steamship Round, and the MS-1, the first class, the head of the mess specialists that were on duty, went up. He gets the first taste. He went back, got another plate. And in the process of him eating that second plate of meat, they had taken the trays that the meat was prepared on, put them into the scullery, and they'd started, spraying down with water to get them to, get cleaned. And as soon as they hit it with water, suds started coming up off of the tray. What was determined was that the gravy and the cleaning detergent were in the same white opaque gallon jugs. And instead of grabbing gravy, they grabbed dish detergent and cooked the meat in the dish detergent.
Oh,
and MS1 thought it was amazing, so much so that it went up for seconds. So he ended up going to the hospital. Anyway, so
okay.
That's not typical, I hope, of submarine food.
But is food on a sub better than what you'd get somewhere else?
So it was when I first started. So the first couple 3 patrols, it was great. Then we, budget tightening, and we ended up getting a surface chop supply officer on board, and we had a patrol where, and I'm given to exaggeration. It's a long time ago, but I remember having elephant scabs breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. And elephant scabs are processed meat patties, and we'd have elephant scabs for lunch, and then they'd have gravy for dinner, and then they'd be broken up and served with eggs for breakfast, and then it was just, it was horrible. But the first few patrols, we had really good food.
So, what's the best job for somebody on a nuclear sub?
What's the best job?
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to be king, right? I don't know. I was actually having a conversation, but similar to this with somebody earlier today as we were talking about empowerment. The people that have the most power to make decisions, they also have the most consequences from the making of those decisions. I think my job rocked. I don't know that I'd want to go and do it again, and I'd probably do it differently this next time where I did do it. But I got to work with great people. I got to work with people who cared about what they were doing. I got to work with people that I could rely on, and I knew they were experts in what they were doing because they had gone through a similar process that I'd gone through. I had a level of confidence in the people that I worked with, much higher than I do now, because anybody can qualify to be a civilian. So I can't say there was a best job. There was definitely some really bad jobs.
Well, that's
on our boat in particular being in.
That's my follow-up. Is what was the worst job that not necessarily had to do, but one you definitely didn't pity?
Oh, if that kicked me off or not. Okay.
There you are.
So the worst job on our boat was a nuke electrician. We had an electrician chief who would stand up and say, anytime anything broke, he would stand up and say, well, my boys can do it. And so they were working 18, 20 hours plus every day, fixing everybody's equipment. At least that's what I remember. I would say that's a horrible job. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where everybody's job is attached to mission, and you understand where your job fits into the mission of the submarine, which for me helps me just enjoy what I'm doing so much more. Whether you're working on the mess decks and really driving morale for the submarine, or if you're an E2 that's there just kind of striking for different jobs and trying things out, whether you're running planes, whether you're painting, whether you're cleaning, when you're doing any of the rest of that stuff, it all ties back into this mission of being a strategic deterrent for the United States. So.
Right. So we've talked best job, we talked worst job, we talked food, good and bad. What about ship shore, or how do you keep in contact with family members while you're out on patrol? Do you have 11 weeks of silence?
So I know it's very different now than it was then. We had these things called familygrams. They were, I want to say 8 49-word messages that you could get in from the outside world over the course of that 11 weeks. Those familygrams got read by probably 6 people by the time they got there. So if there was anything even remotely could be considered as bad news. You never got them. Other than that, when you got into port, you were at a payphone, if you remember those, and using calling cards to be able to make calls.
Andrew says it's like a submarine Twitter. And of course, probably back in your day, you old man, you probably didn't have internet on it. But what did you do for entertainment? Like, were there movie nights? Like, what was the way that people stayed entertained and kept morale up aside from eating?
There's a lot of different ways to answer that question. For your first couple of years you're on the submarine, you don't have time for anything other than qualifications, and that's qualifying for different jobs, getting your dolphins, qualifying as a submarine warfare. So what you do for entertainment then is run around and get verbally abused by people because you don't know enough, and sleeping on the off chance you can get to do that. Once you get qualified, then a couple of other options open up to you. You could take classes. I started studying sociology while I was on, and for me, learning is entertainment. You know that, Chris. I never went anywhere with that because the books that I had to read drove me nuts, although those are exactly the books I'm reading now. So I was just out of sync by 20 years. And then you could do movie nights. I mean, there were movies. If you were one of the shortest people on board, as a nuke, they call him the snob, the shortest nuke on board. If your duty was coming up the soonest, you usually got to pick the movies. And you would get, you get to sit on the mess decks, which for 160 people, well, I guess minus officers. So for 145-ish people, you had 16, what's 6 times 4? 24. You had 24 seats on small tables around. So you couldn't get a ton of people on the mess decks. The cruise lounge was even smaller. You would have two, and if you can kind of picture two seating areas that would sit 3 around a table. You had 2 of those kind of wedged in. You were really close, and you had a TV at one end, and you just kind of sit in there and watch a movie. I never really went in for that because it was too close, and honestly, I pissed off too many of the other people that were on the submarine to want to spend a lot of time around there. Actually, I feel I started hate week a lot of times, which is a week about halfway through the patrol when everybody's just done with everybody. So,
well, thanks for some of those insights. It's again, my frame of reference, having never served, and I often say my greatest regret is having never served on the boat. First of all, thank you for serving in the military, but providing some insights, because the only frame of reference that I ever have as a civilian is what media, good or bad.
mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. Now let's shift gears a little bit. Let's let you drop some bombs on us. So and talk about the 3 things that you've learned from working on boat. What was the first thing that you have?
I think I already shared that one. Just showing my work, having a system that I use to go through and do things, making sure that I've thought through that system before I engage. I have a tendency towards action, and I fail in moving too quickly and changing directions too quickly all too often. But what that really built into me was the just really failing a math test, which was for me just ridiculous. Because I wasn't systematically approaching what I was doing. It's something that I'm struggling with Asher right now. My son, he can get to the answer of a math problem 80-90% of the times just by looking at it and giving the answer. But understanding that being right most of the time, and I guess there's a few different aspects of this, but being right most of the time is not nearly as valuable as taking the time, making sure I do everything that I need to do, and being right 100% of the time, or at least as close to that as I could. So the first of this, show my work. The second one, and as you and I were talking earlier, there's a number of ways to answer this, and this is not about being cynical. So I think the second thing I learned, They gave me a conceptual grid that I could use to, even outside of a simple math problem, a conceptual grid that I could use to figure anything out. Really, they taught me how to learn, how to figure out what the really important things were. I think when we were talking earlier, what are the right questions to ask at the outset, and even as you're going through and doing things. Walking up to a situation and rather than looking around the table and going, gosh, all these tables all these chairs are out of position and they look messy, but really to walk up and go, okay, why are the chairs there? What's the purpose of this room? What was being done in here? And that's a really super simplified way to do it. But rather than jumping in, and this almost goes contrary to what I said earlier, where nukes are taught to dump information. Right. To get rid of that, to circumvent or overwhelm any sort of argument. The ability to dump the information that will circumvent or overwhelm that argument is based on coming in and doing this rapid assessment where you're asking, okay, why, what's this person care about? What is the core of this argument? What research did I do before I even came here? So that I can go in and do that. And then that kind of flows into the third thing. And just parenthetically, as I'm thinking about these three things that I really learned, I've been doing training in a technical and now in a sales, or soft skill setting for decades now. So the ability to learn, the ability to ask questions, and the ability to, approach things from a systematic, show my work has been key in me being successful. So that certainly, set some context for where I came up with these three things. And the third one is the ability to look at things really close, and the ability to step back and see the big picture, and to almost do that at the same time. You're asking, what was my job as a reactor operator? Yes, I was sitting in a chair in front of a panel that had pressures and temperatures and status of pumps and status of valves and all the rest of this. I had to focus very closely on, what exactly was a temperature. I'm not going to give any terms, but what this one specific temperature is and what this one specific pressure is. And that's really important. But I'm also having at the same time, having to listen to what's going on with the throttleman, what's going on with the, I guess that would be this hand, what's going on with, what's our speed, what's our depth, what are the changes that are happening in the plant from that sort of standpoint. Also, what's going on with the electrical plant. Is somebody turning on the ice cream maker? Just bringing some big load up, and then listening to what's going on, the conversations that are happening with the engineering officer of the watch as people are calling in because they're doing different things in not only the plant, but also in the entire submarine. So, and then coming back and going, okay, we just changed depth. What is that going to do to this temperature, this temperature, this temperature, this temperature? What is it going to do to this pressure? What does that mean for this and that and the other? Are there valves that now need to change? Are there pumps that need to change? Are there all the rest of this? And being able to exist in this zoomed out and zoomed in state all the time. From that perspective, that's what I do as I'm teaching. That's what I'm doing as I'm facilitating and I have 10% battery left in my cell phone. As I'm facilitating a conversation, that's what I'm doing. As I'm training, that's it. And unless I'm really tired, that's what I'm doing when I'm at home with my family. So.
Well, Chris, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time. I don't want to take up too much of your remaining battery, since I know you do have a drive back across the bay to get home to the family. But thank you for taking the time, shedding some light on life on a nuclear sub, and the three things that you've learned. I've got one short little video for anybody, courtesy of the U.S. Navy, to tell us a little bit about how they promote sub life. I'm going to roll that, and here we go. Well, I was going to roll that. I think I hit the wrong button. My cursor.
It's a really short video.
Make press for periscope depth. Order to copy the broadcast. Shoot trash. Profile. Pilot intended to proceed to periscope depth and turns for 7 knots. Sonar report 6 to 8 corrections.
Thank you all again for tuning in. Again, this has been the Three Things I've Learned podcast. A special thanks to my guest, Chris Wessling, for giving us a little insight to life on a nuclear sub. If you like this video, please be sure to follow us. Share it with somebody that you think is even considering a career in the Navy, especially if they want to live on a sub. In the meantime, thank you so much. Share this if you like it. Give us a hashtag sublife. That's right, sublife, not thug life, but sublife. And we will see you all next time.